Canada's National Fire Preparedness Rating has moved to its highest alert level. That means firefighters and equipment in every jurisdiction across the country are being put to use. Plus, international help has been requested. There are more than 170 active wildfires burning across the country, with more than half deemed out of control. Saskatchewan and Manitoba have both declared province-wide states of emergency, with thousands of residents under evacuation orders. Eleanor Olszewski is the Federal Minister of Emergency Management, and she joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Very much appreciated.
You've been in meetings today with your provincial counterparts. I mean, what's your sense of where things are at this moment, how prepared the country is for what's been happening?
What I can tell you is that on Wednesday, the federal government received what's called a request for assistance, and that applied to two First Nations communities in Manitoba. One of them was evacuated, and the citizens there were moved to Norway House, and the Canadian Air Force is in the process of moving them to the city of Winnipeg. There's also an issue at a First Nations community called Matthias Colum, and we're involved in evacuating those people at this time as well. So as soon as we received the requests for assistance from the province, we immediately approved them so that steps could be taken to safely evacuate those communities.
Right. And look, there are challenges. It's remote. Some of these are fly-in, or you have roads that are not great at certain times of the year, and there's ferry service. And, you know, the runways to get planes the size of the Hercules in there, that can be a challenge too. But right now, the request for assistance has come from Manitoba. What's the situation in terms of Saskatchewan? There is a province-wide state of emergency there, but there's not yet, as I understand it, been a request for federal assistance. Have there been discussions around that?
Absolutely. I did speak with my provincial counterpart, Tim McLeod, this afternoon, and he advised me that the situation in Saskatchewan is manageable at the present time, and I in turn told him that in the event that federal resources are required, we're absolutely prepared to step up and help.
Okay, under control. It's key, obviously, in both provinces, but with Saskatchewan, the Prime Minister and the Premiers are supposed to meet in Saskatoon. Did you get any sense in your conversations with your provincial counterparts in that province whether it's wise or efficient for that meeting to go ahead, given everything that's been happening in Saskatchewan?
It's my understanding that at least up to this point, it's safe for that meeting to take place.
Okay. So Premier Canoe, he has thanked the Canadian Armed Forces for dramatically accelerating their effort and increasing the number of aircrafts in use. What's your sense of whether what is available right now is sufficient to move the people to safety at the scale and speed that is required? Because when Premier Canoe announced the state of emergency, I believe it was Wednesday, he said this would be the largest movement of people in living memory for most Manitobans. So what's your sense of where you are in terms of the sufficiency of the lift capacity?
Certainly with respect to evacuations where the federal government has been involved, you know, we're satisfied that we'll be able to move people quickly enough and get them to safe evacuation points. And, you know, I might add that with respect to emergency management in the context of wildfires, it involves a tremendous amount of cooperation between various authorities, and that includes local authorities, the province, the federal government, when asked to do so, First Nations people. It can involve Indigenous Services Canada, and it can also involve what we call the humanitarian workforce, which is people from a number of NGOs that work on the ground to make sure that those affected by wildfires get the support that they need at a local level.
Well, you know, it's an enormously complex issue to respond to, but Minister, unfortunately, we're getting an increasingly large amount of experience in responding to these things in Canada. It was in last year, we didn't reach this level of level 5 in terms of the fire preparedness until July. Here it is, it's May. And we got 2 provinces under states of emergency. I mean, what are you and your officials looking at when you see the earlier and earlier and earlier and more severe arrival of wildfire season in this country?
Well, it's completely concerning, to say the least. And one of the things that we absolutely need to focus on is making our communities more resilient to this type of loss, to this type of incident. And The Prime Minister has added the aspect of community resilience to my portfolio so that it's emergency management and community resilience. And so over the coming months and hopefully years, we'll be working very hard to make sure that we do things that keep communities safe, whether that means changing the way that we design the road system, whether it means, I can give an example of something that's already been done, making wharfs in the Maritimes after Fiona more flood resistant. So there's a number of steps that we need to take, which we didn't really have to worry about years ago, but which are front and center now. And so certainly, I and my department consider that a vital aspect of what we'll be doing in the months to come.
Well, I mean, the community resilience is obviously important, but we saw what happened with Jasper. We saw what happened in Lyndon in British Columbia a couple of years ago. And now the fires haven't quite reached the structures, or haven't yet reached the structures of Flin Flon. But that changed very quickly this week when the wind shifted, and now the forecast would suggest the winds may move in an unhelpful direction. I mean, what's the latest you have on just the risk to the town of Flin Flon at this moment?
My understanding is that the town of Flin Flon is at some risk, and certainly, again, when and if the federal government is called upon to support, we will absolutely be there to assist in evacuation, in the aftermath of evacuation. So if that means on-the-ground support with respect to people who need accommodations, and people who need things such as cots and blankets and other emergency supplies, will be involved in the management of that. And certainly at the other end, if financial assistance is required at some point, we'll be there as well.
I wonder, there's been some criticism of the speed and scale of the response. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief, Kira Wilson, she said the federal and provincial governments were too slow to respond to resource requests. There's too much bureaucratic red tape in asking for support. What's your response to those criticisms from the Grand Chief?
I would like to tell the Grand Chief that absolutely First Nations are not alone in this, and that certainly Indigenous Services Canada works very closely with First Nations to make sure they're supported when there's an event like this, such as wildfires. In addition, I'm in close contact with my counterpart, Minister Gulmasti at Indigenous Services Canada, and we're in contact all the time throughout the day to make sure that we can deal with this situation.
Is there legitimacy to the criticisms, though, with what you've looked at so far? And look, I know it's a difficult time when something like this is happening in every direction, but do you feel there were moments where maybe things could have moved a little bit faster when you look at it at this point?
I think we're always prepared to examine what we've done and what's happened in a given situation and see what we can do to make sure that we respond more quickly. Generally, what happens is no matter what the point of entry is with respect to the request for federal assistance, there is a large amount of collaboration between the partners involved in managing an emergency. And so that includes, as I say, First Nations, Indigenous Services Canada, local government, the provincial government, when we're called upon, the federal government as well. And I think I already mentioned NGOs and the Humanitarian Task Force. So there's a lot of moving parts and people that work together to respond in the best way possible to what's happening at the ground. And as you pointed out yourself earlier, David, that can change moment by moment, hour by hour. And so it's information that comes from local people is the most valuable. They're aware of the circumstances, whether the airport's still standing, whether or not there's fire on both sides of the access to the airport, whether or not we can get people out by boat. So that local knowledge that comes from local, municipal, provincial, First Nations is incredibly valuable in how we respond to emergencies like this.
I know the information can change minute by minute, hour by hour on these specific incidents, but the trend line and trajectory we're seeing, there's a pattern, a familiar pattern here caused by climate change, right? That we have these extreme winter storms.
Indeed.
That knock branches off and fell trees, that create a canopy, a floor canopy that dries out, gets hit by lightning, or someone leaves a careless fire, and then we get the wildfires going. And here we are, that in Saskatchewan, which is under a state of emergency, the Prime Minister and the Premiers are going to meet to talk about big national projects with people putting pipelines on the table. And people may look at a climate change-fueled wildfire state of emergency in May and talk of accelerating fossil fuel development and ask how the government can square those things. I mean, how do you view it? And how do you respond to Canadians who look at this and raise their eyebrows?
Well, in my view, the Liberals have always said that we can look after the economy and care for the environment as well. And that's exactly what we intend to do. And certainly, the fact that we're looking at nation-building projects at this precarious economic moment in time for Canada in no way takes away from the fact that we are also focused on making sure that these forest fires, wildfires, floods, that we can mitigate against them, that we make sure that we keep people safe, that we can evacuate if need be, and that we then, study what we can take, lessons learned, and apply those to situations in the future.
Minister of Emergency Management, Eleanor Olszewski, it's good to meet you. Thank you for coming on the show today. We appreciate your time.
Really appreciate it, David. Thank you so much.